Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Here at Cisco Live in Vegas, there is a big focus on the need for businesses to reimagine applications, power hybrid work, secure the enterprises, transform the infrastructure, and also around what's wrong with hybrid work and how to fix it. Today, I've seen Jeetu Patel, Cisco's Executive Vice President and General Manager of Security and Collaboration, here perform some fantastic keynotes. And there was a great quote in one of them where he said, when you have the flexibility in the way that you work, it's more productive and inclusive for all. And those words really resonated with me. So I invited him on the podcast today. Thankfully, he said yes. And I want to expand on that conversation about hybrid work. What's wrong with hybrid work right now? What works? What doesn't? And what are the best solutions forward? Well, buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Las Vegas, where you can join me and Jeetu Patel in conversation about what's wrong with hybrid work today and how to fix it. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Neil, thank you for having me, man. I joined Cisco about 2 years ago, and I run the security and collaboration business. And prior to that, I was at Box, where I was Chief Product Officer. Before that, I was at EMC, where I built their first SaaS offering. And prior to that, I was, in fact, a research analyst and consultant for a long time. I ran my own business in Chicago. So it's been a great ride. You know, big companies, small companies, mid-sized companies. It's been a privilege.
Now, the world has changed so much in the last few years, and your keynote today, you were talking about how 2 to 3 years ago we were thrust into remote working at scale, and how remote working and meeting someone on the show floor at a tech conference seemed like it would never happen again. But here in 2022, we're chatting in person at Cisco Live in Vegas, and some will be watching online. And I think that perfectly highlights the hybrid environment that we're living in and how it doesn't have to be a binary choice. And the magic happens of having the balance and flexibility of being able to flick from device to device wherever you are and whatever the time. But I'm curious, what have you learned from the events of the last few years?
I agree with you, by the way, that the future is going to be hybrid. And you do, people long to be together at times. And then there are times when it's more productive to be distributed. And the big learnings that I've had, at least over the course of the past couple of years, is, firstly, humans have a tremendous capacity to achieve the impossible. Because if you would have asked anyone in December of 2019, hey, do you think if you locked yourself up in an office or in your home for the next 2 years, do you think the economy is going to flourish or tank? There'd not be a single person that said that the economy is going to do well. So we had this amazing amount of resilience as a species to go out and drive through COVID. And but as we get into this third phase, before COVID, everyone worked in the office. Then everyone started working at home. Now you're in the third phase where people are going to work in mixed mode. But hybrid doesn't work completely flawlessly yet. And there's a lot of kind of issues that need to be sorted out. You're 4 people in a conference room, 3 people not in a conference room. Exactly how does that transpire? Well, one of the people in the conference room gets up and starts drawing on a whiteboard. The people that are not in the conference room feel completely disconnected. You have a long room and you're sitting at the back of the room and you can't see the person's facial expression or body language. And it's like, you want to have a close-up view. You can't hear people's audio because they're too far away from the microphone. Those things are hard computer science technology problems that need to get solved. And we have solved them at this point, but it's not something that's been evenly distributed to everyone in the world. And so that's the goal.
I think every business everywhere in the world is going through those same challenges right now. So I'm curious, as someone that gets to speak with your customers all over the world, what is the state of hybrid working right now? And are there any trends in the kind of conversations you're having with your customers?
Yeah, I think customers are all trying to figure out that this is no longer just a technology issue. It's a combination of technology, culture, and space utilization and facilities, and so all those three have to come together, and you have to have a solution that considers those three facets. Because if you just give the technology, but people aren't aware of how to make sure that the conversation gets to be inclusive for the folks that aren't in the room, then that becomes a problem. Yeah. Or if the way in which a room is structured or the spaces are structured are not particularly conducive for and not optimized for the people that are not in the room, then that's a problem as well. Because 98% of the meetings moving forward will have at least one participant that's not in the same physical space as everyone else. 98%. That means basically there's going to be, every meeting is going to have someone who's not remote, who's not in the same location. And if we start making those people that are remote feel left out, then we've just regressed. Yeah. And so you got to make sure that, hybrid work has to work, because when it does work, it opens up the world. And it allows everyone to participate in the global economy, regardless of their location. Someone in the village in Bangladesh should be able to have the same access to opportunity as someone in the heart of Silicon Valley. And if you don't do that, then you're actually giving people unfair advantage because of something as arbitrary as geography, which I don't think in 2022 should be the case.
100% with you there. And we're both in the tech industry, and we both know that you don't talk about the technology or the solution first. It's all about the problem. So to set the scene, what's actually wrong with hybrid working at the moment, and what are enterprises struggling most with? Is it a few of those things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, a few of the things I said, like, the audio quality, the video quality, the whiteboarding, but also networking and connectivity. How do you make sure that if you're at home and if your ISP goes down, that you're able to go out and dynamically switch to cellular? And, Cisco's Meraki routers do that. And so that actually allows you to have a level of redundancy at home that you weren't used to having in the past. Your ability for IT to monitor your quality of service at home, just like they do at work, is another big area, because home is now just a branch office, and it's a micro branch. And a micro branch needs to be treated with the same level of reliability and resiliency that you would treat a regular branch. Security will be challenges. People get on from insecure networks and on unmanaged devices and into unsanctioned apps. How do you make sure that you keep that individual safe and secure, and so that ransomware attacks don't happen or malware doesn't get to spread laterally within your organization? Those are all things that have to be thought through technologically and be integrated. So we feel like it's a combination of networking and connectivity, security, collaboration and communication, as well as visibility and insights. And those four have to come together for hybrid work to really work.
And I suspect this is a subject close to the heart of everyone at Cisco. So can I ask that you offer a bit of an overview of some of the innovation Cisco is delivering for hybrid work and solving some of those problems that we've just been talking about?
We have been so fortunate. We've got a team that's on fire, and they've done thousands of innovations across our different product lines. Just in WebEx alone, for example, we've had close to 1,500 plus innovations in the past 12 to 18 months. And that level of velocity of innovation is fantastic. But what we've done is make sure that we take out the friction. So now what you're starting to see is a lot of the capabilities we're building are invisible, because the cognitive load for people to just go out and keep pressing buttons, it doesn't help to go out and keep adding more features. It just creates more complexity. But if you've got artificial intelligence, the way that you remove your background noise and the way that you enhance sound quality and acoustics and the way in which you go out and focus the camera so that if you stand or sit, you can actually all be at the same eye level in the way that your videos are laid out, those things really matter. And so what we're doing is now starting to build a lot of this technology that's now in the product, which was invisible, but you don't actually, as a user, even have to have the cognitive load of saying, I need to do something. It just automatically happens. And frankly, the other big area is the integration across our different technologies, between networking and collaboration and security and visibility and insights. How do you make sure that these things just seamlessly flow through with each other? And that's the beauty of it.
Just to bring to life some of the things that we're talking about here at Cisco Live, Do you have maybe a use case or a client story that you could share that will just help enable a listener to have an almost before and after picture of where the client was, the journey that they've been on, and the eventual outcome?
Yeah, I mean, look, in some ways, we attempted to work hybrid for all those people that were remote before the pandemic. Yeah. The experience just sucked for everyone. So if you think about, and in fact, in your profession, a lot of people did work remotely. And, I don't know if you worked at home or not, Neil, but a lot of people did work out of home. And your experience pre-COVID was if you were dialing a meeting with a group of people that were all in the office, you felt a little left out. You felt like you weren't part of the action. And that has to change. And so the before and after is that today we're much farther in that journey than we were 2 years ago. Yeah. And my hope is that over the course of the next decade, people don't even notice, and it actually becomes an enhanced experience rather than a degraded experience. I'll give you an example. I joined Cisco right in the midst of COVID, and I didn't meet any of my coworkers for 9 months when I joined Cisco. Imagine, I'm coming into a company with 150,000 people, 75,000 employees, 75,000 contractors, and I don't meet anyone other than Chuck for the first 9 months. But here was the amazing part. Because our technology that we were using at Cisco was so far ahead of what everyone else uses right now, I never felt the distance. And I made close bonds and friendships with people before I ever met them in person for the first time. And so Jerry Elliott, who was our head of sales, and Fran Katsoudas, who was the head of HR, and Chuck, and Liz Santoni, and Todd Nightingale, and Jonathan Davidson, and all these people that I had only met on WebEx. We were friends, and the first time we met at a concert. And I knew intimate details about their lives. They knew the same about me. I knew their family, who they were. I talked to the families. Those things are magical if you can get them right, because it's progressive for society when that happens.
And I think many are finding employee engagement can actually decrease in some cases. And you've just shared a great example there. I mean, because people are being recruited and onboarded online, and keeping them engaged is so crucial. So do you have any other examples of how technology is essentially helping restore that balance and making sure hybrid working works?
I think there's actually a cultural aspect and then there's a technology aspect. But let me actually touch upon this. You bring up a really important point, Neil, which is when the problem and why people miss being together in person all the time is because in person there's a degree of spontaneity that comes from serendipity. You and I had a little bit of a talk before we started the podcast, and I got some context on you on things about your life that I wouldn't have gotten. You asked me some questions about things that I do that you wouldn't have known about. Whereas if you get into a video meeting, all you're doing is you're in very heavy transaction mode. That's not because the technology is broken. It's because we don't allow ourselves on video conferencing mediums to wander. Mm-hmm. And when you don't wander, things get very transactional. If I'm in a 30-minute meeting and I have a 7-second lull at minute 22, someone in the meeting will say, well, are there any other questions? Otherwise, we can give you back 7 minutes or 8 minutes. The problem is that those 8 minutes in real life is where you actually, now imagine if you and I were going out to dinner and we had a 7-second lull. I'd probably ask you something, hey, what do you like doing for fun? Do you have a family? How old are your kids? Some kind of conversation that gives me more context about your life. And that context creates a level of trust. And trust then allows us to have the right level of creativity infused and debate. And that's how ideas spark. Today, the medium is very transactional. And so the shift that has to happen is not just the technological shift, but also culturally, that we have to allow for those meetings. So for example, we bought a company called Slido, and we have this feature in Slido, which is icebreakers. So at the beginning of the meeting, just ask some questions saying, hey, what was the most fun thing you did this weekend? How many steps did you walk this weekend? And what that does is it gives you context on if there's a group of 15 people and they say, I didn't really do anything fun, then you can ask the second level question, why didn't you do something fun? Mm. What happened? Are you okay? And those things then allow you to get the context that's rich enough that you build a tighter bond in a relationship, which is what people miss right now in the transactive world. And so I think there's some there's some room for us to do better from a cultural education standpoint. But we have to, as leaders, master the world of hybrid if we want to be great leaders for the next generation. Because it's just like, when you had presidents that ran for countries, like in the US, they had to master the medium of the time. They had to master radio for communication, then they had to master television. Now they have to master social media. That doesn't mean you can't be good at radio and TV. You just have to get better at the other mediums that are emerging. And that, I think, is super important.
And you mentioned a great word there, serendipity. And I do think a lot of businesses underestimate the power of serendipity. And bumping into someone at a water cooler or a coffee machine from a completely different department, you suddenly get talking and maybe be able to collaborate with each other and solve each other's problems, all from that random encounter. Do you think we underestimate it?
We underestimate the value of it, and we also underestimate being able to do that virtually. Yeah. You can do that virtually. You just have to build that muscle. And we just have to get better as people to make sure that the folks that are not physically around us should not be treated differently, that we can actually have them participate just as well.
There's a great quote I read a few years ago that was the last best experience that anyone has anywhere becomes a standard expectation from what they expect everywhere. And I think as a part of that, we've all got this almost Netflix-like expectation now where we can just pick up and where we left off from any device in any location. But, of course, that causes a whole heap of security issues. So can you tell me a little bit more about the vision for the security cloud and how that can keep enterprises safe from attackers and hackers and all the bad guys?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the most important problems in this day and age to solve is the cyber threats that are going on. Because if you think about it, is a critical part of our infrastructure. It is critical infrastructure at this point, right? Because warfare starts with cyber before it goes to air, water, and land. But even something as basic as if you have a cyber attack on the wrong critical infrastructure service, your power grid could go down, your water supply could be turned off, your financial system could go down, where you couldn't move money, your healthcare system could be completely debilitated. And so the task in front of us, and the threat actors are getting more and more sophisticated, and they have an inherent advantage. They have to be right once. The people who are protecting the systems have to be right every single time. And so we have a huge challenge in front of us, which is how do you make sure that the breaches are protected, and if they in fact are still able to penetrate your system, you have a way to very quickly detect a breach and respond and remediate that in as close to real time as possible, and have it from spreading laterally. I think, like, from a security standpoint, it's one of the most important problems that we have to solve. And the way that security is being solved is it used to be that people would buy point solutions. I have a problem on antivirus, I buy this, and I have a problem on malware, I buy this, I have a problem on endpoint protection, I buy this, I have a problem in network, I buy a firewall. Now, what you're starting to see is people are looking for an integrated platform, because there's 3,500 vendors in the security landscape, and if you count out Microsoft, no one owns more than 5%. If you count Microsoft in, they own 10%. And the way that Microsoft attributes revenue is slightly more allocation-based, so it might not be an apples-to-apples comparison. But regardless, what you start to see is there is a highly fractioned market. There's a ton of players in the market. And on average, most of our customers most customers, not our customers, most companies will have 50 to 60 vendors in their security stack. That is untenable at this point. You can't keep going the way that you're going. So we have to have more of an integrated platform. And that integrated platform, there'll be a set of vendors that'll provide integrated platforms, have to be ones that have a certain set of design constructs on. Can I have it be multi-cloud, so that if you have multiple cloud vendors, your security platform can work across all of them? Can I have it be so that an integration is happening between networking and security, not just security stack by itself? Because you can't be in the connectivity business without being in the protection business. And so there's some very exciting innovation that you will see happening over there. We announced the security cloud recently, which basically is this construct of abstract the user from the complexity and make sure that you give organizations an ability so that no matter where users are dialing in from, a branch office, a home office, on the road. Once they connect to the security cloud, they're secure for whatever application they want to use, whether it be a SaaS application, a private application, or directly to the internet. So we're excited about the future.
I'm excited for the future too, especially after seeing your keynote today, because there's a few things that really shine for me. There was obviously the hybrid working in a box where all the tech is just there and people know exactly what they need. And also, we've got so many different apps on our phones and computers now, from Zoom, Teams, Google, etc. And I love how you're bringing them all together into one place. But I'm going to ask you to look into the virtual crystal ball now. So what does the future of hybrid working look like in your eyes?
The future will be, without giving all the cards away on what we're working on, but I'll give you the future from this perspective. Cognitively, we should not even be able to tell when you've met someone or not met someone, or when you're in the same location or not, because everything should feel completely immersive. The future will be 3D. The future will be frictionless. The future will be multi-vendor interoperability. The future will be tight integration between hardware and software. The future will be, an experience that feels completely immersive. And that's where we think that this is going to go. And there's going to be a ton of things that you do to take out the friction, to take out the distractions, to make sure that the experience is immersive. But that's where we are starting to go. And I think the world is just 5% of the way there. There's so much innovation still to be had, and we're excited to be part of it.
I'm going to pull you up on one thing you said there. You said the future is 3D. So I've got to ask, 3D as in how me and you are sitting across from a table, or are we talking avatars?
So I think there'll be multiple different ways that different companies will experiment on, this construct of, like what different mediums people are going to use. Some call it the metaverse or whatever. The one area that us at Cisco are betting on is photorealistic, volumetric, 3D holographic communication, where it looks like you and I, Neil, right now, we're sitting across from the table from each other. But in a few years, you and I will be able to sit where you're sitting in London, I'm sitting in Palo Alto, and we are able to make sure that we can break bread and have dinner, and it feels like we're right across from each other. But it feels like you're right sitting on my dining table. And for you, it'll feel like I'm sitting on your dining table, because it'll be augmented reality. And I think that is super exciting to see happen. And we've actually made a lot of progress on that already. We've launched that capability. We're actually working right now in certain select use cases. And it's going to take some time for the headsets to get smaller and the technology to keep getting more and more refined, but we're super excited about what this holds for us in the future.
Awesome. That's a beautiful moment to end on. But of course, hybrid working is work in progress. So for anybody listening, wherever they are in the world, that wants to find out more information about these evolving developments, the work that you're doing, is there anywhere on the Cisco website you'd like to point them to?
Go to cisco.com, go to webex.com, and most importantly, check out some of our hardware and software solutions and how they come together. Because if you today feel fatigued, or you feel not productive, or you feel a level of anxiety or stress because you might not come across in your best, most professional self on the far end, we've got solutions that'll just completely delight you. And take a look at it. And by the way, if you happen to use any of the competitive products, that doesn't mean that we won't be able to help you enhance those experiences as well, whether it be Microsoft Teams or Google or Zoom. And of course, we'll work wonderfully well with WebEx, with all of our other technologies as well. So we would love to make hybrid work a success for the world.
It'll be interesting how it all takes shape. And we're no longer talking about working from home at scale or hybrid working at scale. We're now just looking at working better. Just a big thank you for coming off the show floor and spending a little time with me to share that vision. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil, for having me.
I think interoperability, collaboration, hybrid working, etc., just some of the big takeaways from the conversation today, and indeed the whole of Cisco Live. But I'm curious, wherever you're listening to this podcast in the world, I want to know, what is working for you as regards to hybrid work? What doesn't work? What are your challenges? How are you overcoming them? And what are you going to be doing differently over the next few months and years? I invite you all to share your insights with me here at techblogwriteroutlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. Keep those questions coming in. and we'll keep this conversation going. But a big thank you to Jeetu for coming on the podcast today, each and every one of you for tuning in, and we'll do it all again tomorrow. So thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.